Penelope says isn't, but it's showing up on mine. It says it's live.
Maybe it's just a computer.
And they had somebody.
Just waiting for Penelope to give me the okay.
I feel like.
Same problem. All right, we got one more solution. Yank the cable and try it again.
So for people, this video is just like black?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, no, not really. Why do things need to be difficult? Just want to teach Torah.
You shouldn't have to teach electronics at the same time.
But they can hear us? And you?
Apparently, yes. And now it's just not bringing up the camera at all. All right, well, you know what? I cannot be bothered to fight this because I don't want to wrestle. So those who would like to continue to listen to the lesson are welcome to do so. I don't consider myself to be that photogenic in the first place. So let's get on with Torah, and we'll figure out what Meshugas is happening with the computer another time. All right, so you solved our seating chart, right? So who's sitting where? Yes?
So starting at 1.
Yeah.
Bob.
Right, so that's Bob,
Sally.
and then Sally,
Tom.
and then Tom,
Frank.
Frank, right?
John.
And then John,
Doug.
and then Doug,
Alice.
and then Alice. That seems quite reasonable, doesn't it? No one's going to complain? Maybe?
Not that we know of.
But what if this is too close to the band or the kitchen?
Then we have a problem.
Or what if it's too far from the buffet line or where the dessert is? My point is trying to get everybody in the right position and trying to get everybody happy about being in the right position. It's a thankless task. And yet that's exactly the task that we are going to start off with in Bamidbar. Because up until this point, we have been camped at the base of Mount Sinai for the first couple of years. And now it is time for everyone to break camp and head to Israel. And as we all know, getting the tour bus full in the morning is usually the hardest part of any trip in Israel, because it's getting everybody to have finished breakfast, to have loaded what they're doing, to finish going to the bathroom, to get down out of their hotel rooms. Did you forget something? Go back and get the sunscreen. No, I forgot the camera. And that's what we're dealing with. Okay? Okay. Page 769. And I need a designated reader. Go around so you don't have tables. Don't all volunteer at once.
Okay.
All right, Marian, thank you.
On the first day of the second month, in the second year following the exodus from the land of Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tent of meeting, saying, Take a census of the whole Israelite community by the clans of its ancestral houses, listing the names, every male, head by head. You and Aaron shall record them by their birth, from the age of 20 years up, all those in Israel who are able to bear arms. Associated with you shall be a man from each tribe, each one the head of his ancestral house.
All right, so before we know how we're going to get there, we need to know who's going. And one of the most important questions that's going to be for the people before they go into the land of Canaan, the land of Israel for the settlement, is going to be how big is our army? so that we can fight against the people on the other side. And so we need a census for this. And the census is going to be arranged by tribe, right? The different tribes are going to be counted, and then our total will come from that. But people are going to be arranged, associated, they'll be grouped with their tribe, with their the house of their fathers, the house of their ancestors, or ancestral house, as the JPS renders it. Make sense? Right? Why? Why does that make sense? Why should people be grouped by tribe?
How else would you do it?
Well, how else would you? Why do we're going to end up with a total of 600,000 Israelites. Why do I need to know how many Gadites there are and Benjamites there are?
Because tribes tend to follow their own leader, without questioning.
So you're saying tribes might be like Bob, and if I put the tribe in the wrong spot next to someone else, there could be friction, or
No. Tribes have loyalty to their leader.
So tribes' loyalty to their individual leader might be greater than their loyalty to Moses or to God?
Could be, yeah.
And
We're dealing
so,
with people.
so you're dealing with people. You're dealing with people, and their loyalty, the most natural, the most native, inborn loyalty a person has is to their family. All other loyalties are learned, hopefully based upon the good example that comes from that first relationship, but all of the loyalties are learned after their loyalty, their relationship, their connectedness from their family. And so keeping people in their families is not necessarily forcing them to stick with their families, but is reflecting a natural condition that people group by family. And I guarantee you go to a party like this and you will see many people grouping by family, except where friction prevents it. It's just the way we tend to coalesce first before we do something better. Make sense? Okay. Now, Marion, I'm not going to ask you to read all of the wonderful names, but I do want you to read the tribal names, which I think you should be more familiar with, from verse 5 through verse 15.
From Reuben,
Right?
from Simeon,
Shimon, Simeon, you can do either language.
from Judah, from Issachar, from Zebulun, from the sons of Joseph, from Ephraim, from Manasseh, from Benjamin, from Dan, from Asher, from Gad, from Naphtali.
Okay, so these are the leaders of each of the tribes, and they will be the ones who will be sort of, all the people will be listed under those people. And the names are great, but we're not going to go into them at the moment. But there's a name missing from this list.
Yes. Levi.
Levi. Where are the Levites? If you turn the page and go to verse 47, Marion, if you can pick up there.
The Levites, however, were not recorded among them by their ancestral tribe. For the Lord had spoken to Moses, saying, "Do not on any account enroll the tribe of Levi, or take a census of them with the Israelites. You shall put the Levites in charge of the tabernacle of the pact, all its furnishings, and everything that pertains to it. They shall carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall tend it, and they shall camp around the tabernacle. When the tabernacle is to set out, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up. Any outsider who encroaches shall be put to death."
All right, so the Levites aren't being counted because
They have another job.
they got another job, right? Because what was the count for everyone else? Army. And the Levites apparently have a duty more to the tabernacle itself than necessarily being the fighting troops. And so therefore you don't need to count them because that's not their job.
Did they count women and children in that census?
No, that was a list of the men who would be drafted for military service.
So the number could be 3 times as large.
Absolutely. And in a previous class, not for Bamidbar, I'm trying to remember which parasha it was, where we looked at the census the first time, we've talked about the fact that that number is almost certainly not by the Torah's own definition, and certainly not by historical definition, meant to be taken literally.
Yeah.
The Torah itself calls us a small nation, and 3 million people 3,000 years ago would have been an enormous nation. Even today, 3 million is not considered a small number of people, but in the ancient world, it would have been enormous, almost the size of Egypt itself.
Because we spent a whole Seder discussing nothing but this.
Nothing but the number of people.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so the Levites have a special job, therefore they don't get counted, everyone else does, and as we go on, and their job is so special, by the way, that the Torah points out that if anyone else tries to step across that boundary and do what the Levites are doing with the tabernacle and the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, they're dead. Right? That's how special their job is. No one else is even allowed to help. No volunteers on this. It's Levites or no one. Onward.
The Israelites shall encamp troop by troop, each man with his division, and each under his standard. The Levites, however, shall camp around the tabernacle of the pact, that wrath may not strike the Israelite community. The Levites shall stand guard around the tabernacle of the pact.
All right, so the rest of the chapter is going to go through the actual census of each tribe, plus explain to us where the different tribes are going to be arranged as they are marching. Our table order. Right, so in the middle of the table you have the tabernacle, and around the table, 12 slots, you're going to have the different tribes, and it's not open seating. The tribes are going to be placed in one spot or another around the tabernacle, and that will also be their marching order as they head up to the land of Israel. Make sense? Can we see why there might be a bit of a problem here? Right, who gets to go in front? Or is, if it's a march, going in front may be the most dangerous. The vanguard is not always where you want to be. So let's look at some commentaries about what this means. If you want to take one and then slide it down. I'm getting good at that.
Yeah.
All right, so do you think it's hard arranging a wedding seating chart? Imagine being Moses, and you have, even if it's just, say 50,000 Jews, it's 50,000 Jews that you get to arrange for both camping privileges as well as military duty. That is to say, who is most in the most dangerous spot or the most prestigious spot. So Moses was a little nervous.
Moses was anxious to avoid jealousy among the tribes when arranging their positions.
And so Moses, you just have to imagine, this is what the Midrash is saying. Moses is sitting there going, God, Torah's easy. Trying to figure out how to give everybody their spot without getting someone mad. That is going to be murder.
If I tell Reuben to take a position in the east, he might say the south would be better.
No matter what I do, someone's going to complain, right? Because we got 12 different tribes, each one made up of thousands of people. This is no way I'm going to make everyone happy.
But he was spared the ordeal, for the tribes had it clearly arranged at their father's deathbed how they should take up their respective positions when they should go out to bury him.
So the Midrash, and this is from Bamidbar Rabbah, is answering the question that if we were going to be, I don't want to use the term rude, but if we were going to be a little bit acerbic, we all would ask, which is the rest of the Torah portion explains the census and the order that the tribes were arranged around the tabernacle. And not once does anybody complain. Everywhere else in the Torah where Moses is leading the people, there is a complaint or a disagreement or a problem. Where's our water? Where's our meat? Well, why should you get so much? Why do I not get this? Here, one of the most controversial and important decisions of how the people will be arranged for battle as well as their encampment, with relative standing and danger all mixed into it, not a peep of protest. And the Midrash is answering why there was no problem with this. Because quite frankly, I think that if I were to, here's a good way for a rabbi to get fired, right? The rabbi assigns seats in the shul. Everybody agrees, right? If I were to go through the roster of every congregant and to number all the seats and say that this is where everybody is going to sit from now on, this is your spot in the synagogue, that I would not be long for this, well, for this world, let alone the job. that wouldn't be a good idea? And yet Moses does it and there's not a single complaint. And the
But it
Midrash,
says why.
the Midrash answers why.
Yeah.
Because the tribes had already worked it out. So Moses, even though it may look like is saying, this is where Reuben goes, this is where Judah goes, and this is where God goes, Moses wasn't ordering, Moses was simply confirming what the tribes themselves had already worked out. And this also answers the question of, how were the tribes arranged for the first 2 years? If we're only getting the instructions here. And the Midrash is saying, well, they would have been arranged the same way because it was already agreed by the tribes of this is where they were. And they did it at a time when they needed to be together. That is to say, when they came up to honor their father Jacob when he passed away. And so at that point, they already knew where they would be, and they just transferred that over. No one was reopening the issue of who sits where. They already knew. Make sense? Right? Because relative positioning is important in any group, in any family or community or group of friends. I know that I see quite often when dealing with our kids that who sits next to whom during class or during the chapel time or in the front row for Friday night service, that it's, no, I'm sitting next to him. No, I want to sit next. Well, can I sit on the other side if you sit on this side? But then there's a third person who also wants to sit next to Bob this day. And it gets a little friction, right? As soon as you have more than two people, the relative positions become very, very problematic.
With children.
Only with children. Only with children, right? Adults never,
Yeah.
but they may never openly bicker when you go to sit down at the dinner table, but there may still be a little jockeying for position of someone just takes a step a little bit closer to the chair and puts their coat over the back a little earlier than maybe everyone else to sort of stake out a territory. And then another person will put their purse down nearby or pick up the glass off the table and drink from the water before anyone else sits down. So everyone knows, well, you've drunk from that glass, so I guess that's where he's sitting. It's a little bit more subtle, but some of the issues are still there. Because we want to know our standing. We want to know our position within a group. We naturally have a sense of a pecking order, of a hierarchy, of just a relative relationships. And that often matters, but that can also be very, very painful. Again, as I've seen very clearly with many kids, not being allowed to sit down where you wanted to sit down because the person says, no, I'm saving this for someone else, to a little kid is like a knife in the heart. They're saying you want someone else to sit in that empty spot more than me. Why are they better than me? And that brings us back to the question about the Levites. The Levites get position 1, right? If the highest place you can be is closest to God, all the other tribes are in a circle. They're in the middle. Why do they get number 1 position? What's so special about the Levites? I mean, maybe no one's going to argue about this, but in their hearts, isn't there a little unevenness here, a little unfairness? The Levites, and by extension, the Kohanim, who made them so special? What? God? Yeah, okay, so we never complain about God?
Never.
And never. And in fact, the whole story of Korach is going to be a lot of complaining about God's relative assignments to people. But here, we don't hear it. But I know that in the modern world, there are still people who are, shall we say, uncomfortable with the inequality between the Levites and Kohanim on the one hand, and the rest of us. Why should we give preference to Levites and Kohanim for the second and first Aliyah? Why should the Kohanim get to do this special blessing on Yom Kippur and other holidays? It's not really fair. It's not equal. I mean, they're just born to it, right?
But they didn't get a share of the land.
In the ancient world, they didn't get a share of the land. And that certainly would have mollified some. Although having not gotten a share of land, they did get a share of the booty. So they didn't get any land to work. But on the other hand, they didn't have to work any land. And other people brought them free food. So that may have not exactly sold everyone in the ancient world about how fair it was. It's like, well, tell you what, guys, I won't take a farm for myself. you just bring me 10% of what you grow.
That'll work.
That'll work.
Work for me.
It worked for you? Yeah, I'm not sure everyone else is going to call you noble and selfless for making that deal. So let's see how our tradition tries to answer the question of why it should be that there is this unevenness. I don't want to use the term necessarily inequality, but why there is an unevenness among the tribes vis-a-vis the 11 and Levi.
The great king had many legions, the census of which was necessary. But among them was one legion known as the king's bodyguard. He separated them from the ordinary legions and didn't count them together, since they were exclusively for the service of the king. Thus the people were counted by themselves and the Levites by themselves.
All right, so first explanation to examine. They're uneven because they do have this different job. And of course, you would expect that they get counted, but they get counted for their job, and you get counted for your job, and that's just going to be different. Right? No problem. I mean, nobody would ever think that the king's bodyguards were better than the rest of the legions, right?
But it was more honored.
Yeah, it would still feel more honored, wouldn't it? I mean, if you're part of the king's bodyguard, doesn't that like automatically imply you are elite? The king's not going to pick the riffraff or the poor, unskilled soldiers to be part of his bodyguard. He's probably going to go through and pick the best of the legions to make up his personal legion. So there's still a little rankle that the Levites are getting an honor that the rest of us don't get. All right, let's try another explanation.
The tribe of Levi took no part in the making of the golden calf, and also punished the offense of the others. Therefore, they were set apart for the service of God, and were not to be numbered in common with the rest of them.
Okay, so why were the Levites given this honor?
They didn't have any part in making the golden calf.
They didn't do the golden calf, which means they earned it. Right? The Levites were given the honor of serving God because they had earned it, whereas the rest of us had lost it. That's the implication of this. Does that make sense? Just read the next text, Marian, which is sort of the parallel midrash.
At the giving of the Ten Commandments, the whole house of Israel, without distinction of tribes, were alike willing and ready to take upon themselves the burden of the law. All the people together answered and said, etc. But the whole of Israel soon after became unfaithful, and the one tribe only, that of Levi, kept steadfast to God's commands and proved themselves worthy of his service.
Okay, so what is being discussed in these two midrashim is the notion that you can look at it two ways. You can either say that the Levites were elevated, by God by being given this particular task, and the rest of us were therefore, and the rest of us were just here, right? This is what we call like rest, right? The rest of us were on this level, and the Levites got a promotion. Or you can look at it as being like this. The rest of us used to be at that level, and we were demoted by our own behavior with the golden calf. It's sort of the equivalent of who would like to volunteer for this assignment? And the whole rank all takes one step back, leaving one poor guy alone, who's now the volunteer because everyone else is retreated, as opposed to saying the Levites stepped forward. So the Midrash is saying we started equal. But at the Ten Commandments, there was no, the Levites were going to have a special job compared to the rest of you, that at the giving of the commandments at Sinai, we were all on the same plane, and we were all had the same spirit. We will serve God wholeheartedly. And that was all that would be required for having this Mishkan duty. Indeed, there's a teaching that it was supposed to be the firstborn of every family. That would be those designated, that there would be an honor that would be spread throughout all of the tribes. But with the golden calf, we botched it. And therefore the Levites were the only left who hadn't. And therefore, when it came time in the wilderness to establish a hierarchy, they were the only ones left standing in the front row because the rest of us had all retreated. Yay? Nay? Is that fair? Maybe?
It's more fair than anything else so far.
It's more fair than anything else, yes. But there's still a problem because afterwards, the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, now and all the way up till today, I didn't make the golden calf, right? My ancient ancestors who were not Levites may have made the golden calf, but I certainly didn't. So why am I still demoted? Right? And why are those of you who are Kohanim or Leviim, why do you still get privileges? Just because your family was on the right side of one decision forever after, you get special privileges and perks? At least you earned it, but that still seems like there should be an expiration eventually. So, onward.
God loves the righteous. This expression has special reference to those of the righteous who are not priests or Levites. Priests and Levites inherit their dignity and are spoken of as a house, that is, the house of Aaron or the house of Levi. But righteousness is not hereditary. There is no house of righteousness. It comes spontaneously to good and worthy people.
Okay, so one answer from the Midrash is that God loves the righteous more than God loves the Levites or Kohanim, because the righteous are singled out for special affection throughout the Psalms and other places. So the righteous are up here, well above the Levites, because the Levites, it is just hereditary. Yes, once it was set in motion, it became sort of set, but that's not the apple of God's eye. That's a special job. That is a distinction. It is an unevenness, but it's not that God likes them better. It's just that they have a particular job to do. And that job may be hereditary, but that means their honor is not their own, right? They do not own the dignity of being a Levite because they didn't earn it. They have that role, they have that responsibility, and they have the perks that go with it, but it's not their personal achievement. Being righteous is what truly earns God's love and respect. And righteousness is open to everyone and is required of everyone, whether you were born a Levite or Kohen or whether you were born the rest of us. All of us are called to be righteous. And that is the ultimate goal that all of us have to earn individually and personally. Make sense? Better? Maybe? Okay. But if we're here and the Levites were left standing, as it were, or we retreated, and so we're saying, okay, fine. When it comes to righteousness, there's the rest of us and there are the Levites. And as far as righteousness goes, we're pretty much the same. We're equal, right? They may have a different job than we do, but they're still no better than we are. They just have this distinction. Well, what about others? What about those that were not at Mount Sinai? What about the rest of the world? So we're going to deal first with one category, which is the rest of the part of the rest of the world which has chosen to become Jewish. Where do they fit? They're not in the rank and file of the tribes, right? The ger, the convert, is not standing under a particular flag because they're not from Zebulun, they're not from Issachar. So where do they fit into this? Are they the same or are they lesser? Next midrash.
The Lord guards the strangers.
Right, and that's a continuation of Psalm 146. So in Psalm 146, we first saw God loves the righteous, and then it continues on by saying God guards the stranger. And the stranger is, as we've talked many times before, is used as a term for the ger, for the person who has converted.
The convert who embrace Judaism are kept steadfast in their faith by God himself. and are in every respect like a Jew born. Love is granted to Israel. The same gift is bestowed on them.
That is to say, the gift of God's love.
Songs are given to Israel and also given to them. Preservation is promised to Israel, and the preservation is promised to them.
Right? So people who convert, they become part of the rest, right? So the rest is considered born or convert. And I apologize for my handwriting. The board's bouncing more than usual. They're the same in every way. And therefore, there's no unevenness between them and the rest of us. Does that make sense? Or at least there shouldn't be, according to Torah. Whatever your individual experiences may be, if there is unevenness in the treatment, it's not reflecting Torah and Judaism. It's reflecting that whole table and trying to find where people sit and the pecking order and the way people treat each other, which is contrary to the teachings of Torah and Judaism. But what about the others? That is to say, what about the actual non-Jews? Not people who convert, not people who are converting, but people who are and will remain not Jewish. Are we better than them? Right? The way the Levites are better than us, are we better than them? Is that the hierarchy?
Or is it that we're just different?
Or are we just different or distinct? Is this unequal or is this simply uneven? That is to say that there is a difference between, but not necessarily a ranking that happens. Well, let's take a look. First, one example.
Potiphar frequently saw Joseph moving his lips in prayer.
So we remember Potiphar was the official of Pharaoh who had bought Joseph as a slave when he was sold by his brothers. And he observes Joseph praying and sees him moving his lips and wants to know what's going on.
One day he demanded an explanation. Joseph told him that he was praying to his God. Potiphar asked to see that God.
Right, so Potiphar says, okay, so you're praying to your God. Show me your God. Right? Potiphar lived in an idolatrous world. If you prayed to a God, you had an image of your God. It was a statue, it was a tree, it was something. So show me your God.
Joseph invited him outside and told him to look up at the glaring sun, which of course Potiphar was unable to do. Joseph said, "This is one of my God's messengers. How can you then hope to look at the great master when you are unable to look at one of his servants?"
Good response?
Great response.
Right? If you can't even look at one of God's creations, how can you hope to look at God himself? But isn't it also a little, I don't know, bit of a dig at Potiphar? I mean, A, for being stupid and following idolatry, obviously, and thinking that there should always be an image of a God. But wasn't Joseph already connected to God? Wasn't that the whole point of his prayer? When he said, "Show me your God," couldn't he have taught him about God and about the oneness of God and the non-corporeality of God and helped Potiphar connect to God the way he was connecting to God? Why take him outside and hurt the poor guy's eyes? Isn't he just showing up this pagan? And that may make us feel good, but isn't that also kind of making us feel better than, superior than? Maybe a little. Aha, look at the stupid pagan.
Yeah, but Joseph was no more able to look at the sun than Potiphar.
Exactly. Joseph couldn't look at the sun either. It would have hurt his own eyes too. And Joseph already knew that there were better ways to, in quote, look at God, that is to say, to experience God. Why not share those with Potiphar rather than rubbing the poor guy's face in it? Not poor guy, he was a master, he owned Joseph. Obviously, there was a little resentment going on here, since if you're a slave, you probably don't have great warm feelings towards the person that has purchased you. But it still seems a little triumphal, a little bit superior sounding between Joseph and Potiphar. And in a way that might possibly make us uncomfortable, even if we're willing to point out the foolishness of idolatry. Isn't ultimately our goal to elevate the pagan, not to just laugh at them?
Potiphar might not have been, Joseph may not have felt that Potiphar was ready for further teaching about God, about our God, and that his position in the hierarchy of Egypt or the Egyptians was not strong enough at that point to be able to teach, because Potiphar wasn't really asking anything more than show it to me, show me who this God of yours is.
Mm-hmm. But couldn't Joseph have simply answered, my God has no body and no image? I don't worship an idol or a statue. I don't worship the sun, the moon, or the stars.
Could have.
It's a little too abstract.
It had to make the guy's eyes water to get the point across. And so this is a question. Does Judaism view the non-Jews as beneath us because they miss that basic point? Let's just leave it for the ancient world, for the pagans and idolaters. If we're uncomfortable with using that terminology with modern religions, which are primarily non-pagan and idolatrous in this country, do we see them still, the pagans, as being lesser than? As something that's an object of ridicule, scorn, of derision, of fools? Or do we see them as objects of pity that need to be helped or need to be transformed to be Jews? How do we balance this, and how has our tradition seen it? Next text.
If the non-Jews would only have understood how beneficial the Temple of Jerusalem was to them, they would have ornamented and guarded it.
How beneficial the Temple of Jerusalem was to them. All right, so the premise of the Midrash is that the Beit HaMikdash, the Temple in Jerusalem, benefited the non-Jews. Right, this is one of the Psalms in Hallel. We say that all the nations should give gladness for our redemption. Rabbi said, well, why should they be happy that we were redeemed? And one of the answers is because we were redeemed and we have Torah and then the temple, it benefited the other nations as well. But how could it benefit them? Right? It wasn't their temple, it was our temple. Well, onward.
At the consecration of that temple, King Solomon prayed.
And this is a quote taken from the Book of Kings.
Also, a stranger that is not of your people Israel, but comes out of a far country for your name's sake, when he shall come and pray at this house, you will hear in heaven, your dwelling place, and do according to all that the stranger calls to you, that all the people of the earth may know your name and be in awe of you.
All right, so what is Solomon's prayer to God on behalf of the non-Jew?
Receive his prayer.
Answer their prayers too. Hear the prayer of the non-Jew. That here in your temple, when someone comes to the temple to worship you, even if they're not Jewish, God, hear their prayer.
Were non-Jews permitted to come to the temple?
To different parts of it, yes. So by and large they were, and by and large they were able to offer up sacrifices. They couldn't participate in certain sacrifices, such as the Passover sacrifice in particular, but for just coming to bring a free will offering, absolutely a non-Jew could do so. And in fact, both the rabbis as well as Josephus remarked that there were sacrifices offered up daily on behalf of the Roman Empire. Okay. And moreover,
Notice that to the Israelites' prayer, there is a condition attached before it is granted.
right? So the Midrash, in slightly out of order language, points out that there is a explicit, slightly longer version of this prayer in the Book of Chronicles. Book of Chronicles often repeats things that were in the Book of Kings. And there, where it talks about Solomon's prayer on behalf of Israel, there's a codicil, there's a condition that's added that is not found in the passage we just read. Because in the section regarding Israel, if you keep reading, Marion.
For in the prayer for Israel of Solomon continues, then you will hear in heaven, your dwelling place, and forgive and render unto every one according unto all his ways, whose heart you know. But to the prayer of the stranger or non-Jew, no condition is attached. And Solomon prays that the Lord may grant his prayer unconditionally.
All right, so what's the distinction that the Midrash is picking up on in the two different prayers, one for the Jews and one for the non-Jews?
There are no conditions attached to the non-Jews' prayer.
And what's the condition attached for the Jewish prayer?
You have to mean it.
You have to mean it, and? Because that's what it means by knowing your heart, and?
Give.
Well, forgive, but according to his ways. If he hasn't earned it, if he hasn't been a righteous person, if he hasn't been a good person, Solomon is saying you don't need to answer the prayer of an unrighteous Jew or of an insincere person, an insincere Jew. Let's be very distinct because that's what the Midrash is. But the Midrash is saying that you don't find that according to his ways and by his heart in the same line dealing with the non-Jewish prayer. For the non-Jew, it's enough that they came and prayed. That alone should grant them the fulfillment of their prayer. So a non-Jew has an easier time accessing the blessings of God than the Jew did, according to this Midrash. We were judged more strictly, I guess you could say. Does that make us better? Worse? Different. That makes us different, right? Because I think what the Midrash is trying to point out here to us is that for a non-Jew to come to the Temple of Solomon would have been an amazing feat in and of itself, and it would have been the first step of them acknowledging God as God of the world. Therefore, please allow them to feel the fulfillment of your blessings simply by virtue of them having come and done this. Whereas we, who should already know that God is God of the world and should already know what blessings there are available, we should be living a life of those blessings, of the commandments, before we would expect any additional benefit above and beyond that. Yes, Hannah?
Is it like when a child has a friend over and the parent may let the other friend do something that the other, like they wouldn't let that kid do, just to make them feel more welcome?
So we, not that there's any personal experience with this. A parent might be more forgiving, more helpful, more generous to a guest, even a peer of a child, than the child, him or herself, in order to make them feel welcome and accepted in that house.
So are you trying to bribe non-Jews?
Well, it's a good question. Is this God's way of manipulating them so that they'll become more connected to God? Is this a bribe?
Maybe.
Maybe? Well, what's the difference between a bribe and a reward?
One's given before.
One's given before, one's given after. Probably depends on whether you're receiving or whether you wish you had received. So I would probably argue that this is meant to be more of a reward, that this is meant to be more of a fulfillment of what we want them to experience so they will maintain an attachment. So I wouldn't personally think of it as a bribe, and they've definitely earned it because they had to overcome a much bigger hurdle to bring themselves to the Temple of Jerusalem than a Jew did, because they're coming out of nowhere. They're coming out of the desert, which is going to lead us back to our Bamidbar, back to our Torah portion, and back to the desert.
And God spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai. Why in the desert of Sinai?
And so there are many midrashim about that very first line of our Torah portion, where it says Bamidbar Sinai, in the wilderness in the desert of Sinai. This is one explanation of that question. Why in the world should God point out that we are Bamidbar, in the wilderness of Sinai? Why not just say in the second year and the second month, this is what happened? Do we really need an update on our location? It's not like we've moved. So why mention Bamidbar now? Why mention the wilderness?
From here, our sages taught that through three things Torah is given: fire and water and desert.
Right, the fire and water you're welcome to look up, and the original Midrash gives the details of where we see fire and water for that. but we're focused on the desert.
Just as these are free for all the inhabitants of the world, so too the words of Torah are free. As it is written, everyone who is thirsty, go to water.
Right? So the beautiful words of Isaiah that if you are thirsty, come for the water. And the water is used in Isaiah as well as consistently throughout Midrash as a metaphor for Torah. Right? The Torah, just like fire, water, and the emptiness of the desert, which belongs to no nation, are free. Right? The desert is ownerless. That's what makes it the wilderness by legal definition in rabbinic mind. It's free. It belongs to everyone, and Torah too belongs to everyone.
Also, whoever is not open to all, like a desert, is not able to acquire wisdom and Torah.
Right? Unless you make yourself like a desert, and that doesn't mean dry, and it doesn't mean hot, it doesn't mean thirsty, it doesn't mean you have to go move to Arizona. It means you have to make yourself also ownerless, what's called hefker, which means that you are not proprietary, you are not closed, you are not sealed to the rest of the world, but anyone is able to come to you, and you are able to go to anyone. Unless you are willing to do that, then Torah will not come to you. Right? So the Torah in both of these ways, according to the Midrash, is connected to the Bamidbar, connected to the desert. Make sense? Maybe? Okay, so Torah, God, uniquely Jewish.
So everybody.
According to these Midrashim, it's open to everyone. Right? We may feel that we are the owners of Torah, but we are the carriers of Torah. Right? The Torah is the blueprint of the world, and the world belongs to all nations. It's true that there are particulars in Torah's teachings for us as a nation of how we live, just as there are particulars in how the Levites will group compared to the rest of us. But that does not mean that the rest of them have no share in God and Torah. They do, in their own way, and God willing, they will seek and they will find it. But we are not better than them because of it. We are simply different. We're only better than those who are or aren't. I erased it. If we're shooting for that righteousness as our goal. Let's finish up with our last few quotes.
Even a non-Jew who fulfills the Torah is considered to be on the level of the high priest. Even a non-Jew who studies the Torah is considered to be on the level of the high priest.
So you want to be equal to the Levites? You want to get rid of this Levites versus the rest of us and all of that? Study. Fulfill Torah. Right? If you want to talk about being on the level of the high priest, very simple. Live a life of godliness. And you're done. And then it doesn't matter who you were born to.
I call upon the heavens and earth to testify for me that whether Jew or non-Jew, whether man or woman, whether slave or maidservant, according to the actions that he does, divine inspiration rests upon him.
Right? God will touch, God will guide everybody according to the ability and their willingness to follow God. It doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter where they come from, doesn't matter Kohen, regular, slave, non-slave, Jew or non-Jew. God is accessible by everyone. Which leaves us only one last question.
The nations of the world cannot say that God did not go and speak and knock at their doors and ask them if they wanted to accept the Torah.
Right, so this is the end of a much longer midrash that talks about God offering the Torah to all the nations, and most of them, well, all of them except us, refusing it. And then at the end it says, therefore they can't complain that God never knocked on the door and offered it to them. And that's true. The nations of the world should not claim that our teachings say they have no share in God or Torah, and therefore they can be as wicked as they want. God has approached and continues to approach each and every one of us and each and every person on the planet. It's up to us to hear the knocking. It's up to us to hear the knocking. And when we get ready to celebrate Shavuot, which is this coming Saturday night and then Sunday and Monday, it's about hearing the knocking. It's about recognizing that God is continuing to knock at the door of each and every one of us, offering us God's ways and the blessings that come with it. But you got to hear the knocking and you got to open the door. And that knock and that door is able to be opened by everyone. It may look different, just like the life of the Levites looked different than the life of the rest of us. But the access to God is identical. And the ultimate place we have is identical. So answer the door.
I don't feel that we look at non-Jews as being better than non-Jews. But I do feel that within Judaism, we have varying sects that do look as though, look upon it as, you're here, we're better than, because we observe more or we do more.
Right. And the real danger, whether it be collectively as Jews towards non-Jews or non-Jews towards Jews, which has occurred historically much more often,
Yes.
but I'm not talking to them, I'm talking to us, or within Judaism and different sects within Judaism, is not to believe that there are differences, not even to believe that the path that you are following has achieved more for you. That's perfectly fine. If you believe that your observance or your study has allowed you to achieve a certain spiritual benefit and blessing that you would like others to also partake of, you are welcome to that opinion. And you are welcome to debate and discuss how that occurred and what others could do. And if you, long as you are willing to listen to others who have a serious position that might be contrary, that's called Jewish learning. But when you believe, therefore, you are better, innately or in some way superior to others, that's where the weight of our tradition crashes down against you and says, no, you cannot be arrogant, you cannot be discriminatory, and you cannot be, by all means, cruel to those that you feel have not earned the respect that you are going to give them, because they are you and you are them. You are equal. You may feel that you have answered faster, you may have feel you have answered the knock more, but that does not make them less than you. It just means that you have in this metric perhaps earned more. And you better be willing to listen to those who disagree, because you may not have earned what you think you've earned. So it is a huge problem, but it goes back to that whole issue of the kids finding the seat on the bus or at the cafeteria table or at the adults at the wedding table. There is a natural tendency to want to think you're best, to want to think you've reached the top of the dog pile. And that's a tendency that Torah tells us time and time again only leads to pain and suffering. That we can think of ourselves and be proud of our achievements, but that does not make us superior to those who maybe even rightly have not achieved as much. Instead, we need to help them grow. And that is only done with kindness and love, not with scorn and derision. All right. Well, hopefully for all of us, not just God. All right.